Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more discernment. Today we're going to be diving back into the Archaix Chronicon. We will be reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not going to be the format for everyone, but people will find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. If you find value, I ask that you do all of the wonderful things down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment, whether you agree or disagree with anything that is stated. Put it in the box, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you truly find value, I ask that you hit me with the super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of any of my books. The first one, A Series of Unconventional Beliefs, details the procedure by which I learned to use the Holy Spirit to heal myself and how you can do the same thing. The second one, The Green Stone, is my work with spiritual alchemy. I consider it to be the completion of Carl Jung's Mysterium Coniunctionis and his work with the archetypes. We have revamped the entire MBTI system. The third one is going to be the most relevant to today, almost certainly, and that is A House Built Upon Shifting Sands, a biblical deconstruction of the Bible, using the Bible as the source to deconstruct the Bible. It is the outflow of a playlist called the Unconventional Bible Study, where I read aloud the Bible. These books are available for purchase down below, and as well as for you to listen to me read them for free through the links also provided. The playlist with the appropriate name will give you the book in its entirety for free. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the Archaix Chronicon. We will be picking up at 2829 BC because that's where we left off. 2829 BC, 1066 Annus Mundi, 4934, sorry, 4934 before Armageddon, 590 before the flood, 2410 Anunnaki chronology, 1480 Phoenix chronology, 1210 orbital chronology, and 610 descent of the Watchers. The first son of the Anunnaki matriarch is Algar. His reign is recorded in the Sumerian Kings list as 3,600 shars, evenings and mornings, which is 100 years. His reign ending in 2729 BC. I have not, as of yet, seen any evidence whatsoever that a shar is a day. Right? It can be, but that appears to be only Jason's interpretation of that particular word. And if it's only one person, that's going to make it hard. But at the exact same time, I made that exact same argument, right? The argument about creation is entirely founded upon a misinterpretation of a word. I do not pull that out of my own understanding, right? The word haya means the I am, right? It is the I am word. But if people took it to be let there be, and that is not the way it was intended at all. It is quite literally a breath of creation, and the etymology of the word bears that out. It is used in other places in exactly the right way. The only place that it is different is the place where they need you to understand it a little bit differently. And so that is why I have the objection with that particular phraseology. The same with the logos, right? We did the exact same thing with the logos, but the difference between what I did and what he's doing, I showed you, right? I went through and we did it in a discussion, like the very first Genesis video. I'm pretty sure we did the word study for this. It is also in the book, right? It is also in the book. This is why I interpret it this way. We don't have that for the shar, right? The shar is you just take it on my word that it is different than what everybody else on the entirety of the planet says. That may be true. It absolutely might be true that it is completely different, but we don't have the evidence, at least in this document, at all for that interpretation. And that is a vitally important thing to understand. Everybody else on the entire planet says 36,000 years. Now, that is a stretch for the lifetime of anyone. I don't believe that these were extraterrestrials. They may have been. And I don't believe that they had these extraordinarily long lives, but they might have. We don't know. All we have is the textual evidence and the interpretations that we make off of it. I don't have the knowledge base to argue either side of the Shar argument. But evenings and mornings, that is definitely a day. I don't know that it is defined that way, or else somebody else would have seen it that way. Especially, especially since it is such a long chronology, right? If we're talking about one person recorded for 36,000 years, well, that is stretching credulity, and I have a serious problem with that. This says that it's going to be 80 years, right? That is better, or 100 years. That's better, right? 100 years is stretching the lifetime, but it's inside of a lifetime, right? The outside edges are around 120. That is an extraordinary long time to live. Uh, I don't believe that most of the biblical ages that are old like that are correct. The problem is that this could be a different turning of the it could be a turning of the moon, right? The turning of the moon is a month. One full cycle of the moon is 28 days. And so this could be that. This could be a week. This could be whatever. It could count the progression in a quarter of a year. If you're going to make the argument that the word is wrong, then you need to make the argument in the document where you are saying that the word is wrong, so that people who are reading the document can take that knowledge from it. That is one of my major contentions with all of this, right? We have a couple, right? Basing it off of Genesis, Enoch, and Jasher is dumb, right? Those particular things don't hold weight as a truthful thing. And so anything using those as references is not very well advised. And the other thing is that if you're going to make a claim, you should support it inside of the document where it should be. I should not have to go seeking external validation, whether that is directly from Jason or from a different volume of his. If it is in here as an assertion, then it should be explained why, right? This parenthetical evenings and mornings does not do it. The only reason I know that that is his argument is because of external sources. If it is inside of the document, it is a change of the understanding, then it should be an explained change of the understanding. That's all I'm trying to say with that. Right. Evenings and mornings, which is 100 years. His reign ending in 2729 BC. His reign completes the 80 years, 28,800 days of the Eridu dynasty begun by his mother. How is that a significant number, right? This would be a significant number if she reigned for 80 days, right? That would be the Eridu dynasty begun by his mother was 80 years long. Well, he is over that now, right? This is saying it was 100 years. Well, that is 20 years longer than 80, right? And so if it was only supposed to last for 80 years, then it extended past by 20, and that is not completing, that is superseding, right? Completion would be that it ended upon the date when it was supposed to end, which would have been 80 years. And so she could have completed that by reigning for 80 years, or he could have completed that if she reigned for 20 and he reigned for 60, right? That is a completion of 80. Reigning for 100 past her reign is not a completion of 80 years. She is considered the genetrix of the seven kings, who were considered as gods to the Sumerians and later Babylonians. Though the Sumerians recorded 8 rulers, they were called the seven kings because the genetrix was excluded. There is a cycle, right? I do have something that I assert, right? There is 7 internal chakras and 1 external chakra, creating a cycle of 8 for pretty much everything. I do believe that 8 is the octave. It is the creative toroid. It is the completion of the cycle, both from source and return to source, and the entirety of the creation in between. This plays into my understanding as an allegory, right? If there are 7 kings with the one genetrix, which is the thing that creates it, that would be the divine aura. The rest of them would fall in line with the internals. Now, whether that is a direct one-on-one correlation remains to be discovered, but that is the correlation that I naturally assume from this. This can be planets, right? There's planets out there and they rule things. They are called kings. There are 7 of them with an extra, right? And so these things could mean something else other than what is intimated by the text directly. That is not to go in either direction, right? But naturally, for me, with the understanding that I already hold about how things do work, that is going to be more aligned with the internal work than it is with anything external. This was the 76th year of pyramid construction. Footnotes: 1. Gerald Massey Lectures 109. 2. Gerald Massey Lectures 109 and 110. We may wind up having to do the Gerald Massey Lectures next, right? Like, we're in the middle of the book of Jasher. I have the On the Origin of the World ready. Like, it's been sitting here waiting for me to read through it. I felt like Jasher was a better fit for what we're doing here. It kind of co-plays into the whole Chronicon understanding. And so that's why I'm doing that. I do plan on doing almost all of these, right? We have Jasher, we're doing that. The Odyssey of the Gods, that'll probably be in there. Stones and Scarlet Thread, I believe, is still under copyright. I don't know that I can do that one. But some, like, I do want to do as many of these particular footnotes as possible because they will help to explore ideas, which is why we are doing this. All right, 2815 BC, 1080 Annus Mundi, 4920 before Armageddon, 576 before the flood, 2424 Anunnaki chronology, 1494 Phoenix chronology, 1224 orbital chronology, 624 Descent of the Watchers, 558 Olmec calendar, 288 Vedic calendar, and the 24 Anunnaki dynasty. The Great Pyramid of Giza and the complex is complete, requiring 90 years, 1,080 months, to complete from its start in 2905 BC. That complex is impressive, right? If you're unaware, there are 3 pyramids on top of that complex and a massive substructure. Huge tunnel system. Not the deep one. I ain't even dealing with that. I'm talking about the one on top, the one that used to be a labyrinth, the one that is exposed if you actually go there and see. And you can see the tunnels. We know that they do that. And so, hard sell, right? The entire complex is complete in 90 years. That's a hard sell. That is a massively hard sell. Without direct supernatural intervention, right? And that is what is explained here. But there is really no reason to believe that particular thing. There is some type of technology, probably, that we do not know about. I believe that it's probably related to sound in some way, but that is all speculative. But to complete the entire complex of Giza in 90 years, that is a feat. That is a feat. This 1,080 months, mirroring this 1,080 Annus Mundi year. This 90 years is 32,400 days, or 10,800 times 3 days. This 32,400 days is reflected in the length of the original perimeter of the Great Pyramid's base, 3,024 feet, or 1,008 times 3. Even today, as measured by Graham Hancock, it is, what is this, 32,316 feet? I'm assuming that that's what that's supposed to be. The geometry of the pyramid further identifies its own date of construction. You know, it is an interesting thing about the actual construction of the pyramid. Right? It plays into sacred geometry. We do not make any doubts about that, right? Math will math. If you're building a pyramid, sacred geometry is going to be intricately connected with that. But there are some alternative understandings about why we have the pyramids. The land of Kim is a very interesting dive. Right now, I don't know whether it is fully verified, right? I am not a chemist. I am learning some things about alchemy, and that may lead into chemistry. The research for the current book is definitely hard into that. But there is significant reason to believe that there was a specific chemical process that underwent inside of the pyramid through the various chambers, right? The king's chamber served as one source of things. The queen's chamber was another, the tunnels as combining points. And if that is true, right, there are very specific ratios and things that go into the creation of compounds, right? Pressure, mixture rates, flow rates, all of those things make a big difference. We have chemical plants. I have worked inside of several of the reactors as a boilermaker, pulling out catalyst and breaking apart the various inner workings of this. And so they have to be very specific. The tolerances are very tight and they have to line up pretty closely. And if I was to make an assumption about chemical combination processes, they would more than likely accord with sacred geometry as well. It is, if there is a possibility that these pyramids were used in the way that is intimated, right? This was making ammonium nitrate, I believe, is the particular substance that is being said, right? Ammonium nitrate is a fertilizer. It is a very good nitrogen source. It's a great ammonium source too, but uh, that is what we use currently on our corn and our soybeans and things of that nature in order to help them to grow. Um, Anhydrous ammonia is another one. There are a lot of fertilizers that can be made by simple combinations or extractions. And it may be that the pyramid is related to that. And if it is, then I would fully expect the proportions, the degree of angle, all of that to comport with sacred geometry and with the exact ratios that would be needed, right? So if there was a 2-to-1 mixture, then one chamber is going to be twice the size of the other chamber. If the flow rate has to be at this particular thing, then the slopes are going to match in the way that would make that happen. That is, while not definite, something that is definitely possible, if not likely. It would explain an awful lot about these chambers and passages, even down to the residuals that are on the walls, like literally on the walls, right? Literal evidence of chemical interactions literally sticking to the walls. And so that could very well explain much more significantly than this particular chamber going in this, or this passage moving in this direction signifies something for this date system, but the chamber signifies something for this date system, and this other thing signifies something for a whole separate date system. That doesn't make sense. If it all comported to one date system and one date, that would make sense. Back to the text. The pyramid sits on a foundation of 4 corners, but the monument was designed to have a 5th corner, the top stone or apex, the cornerstone. That is a good assumption, but it is an assumption, right? We don't know that they did that. We do not know that they intended to put a capstone on it at all. That is an assumption. We make an assumption that there wasn't one ever, right? It is entirely possible that there was. It's possible that it was solid gold. And if it was solid gold, it would be as hard to move that onto the top of the pyramid as it would be to move all of the stones, right? Gold is heavy. And that would be a significant piece of gold. Maybe it's gold inlay. Maybe it's gold clad. Maybe it's partial. Maybe there's some combination of metals that resemble gold that's a lot lighter. Anything is possible because we have zero evidence, right? We can speculate about all kinds of different alternatives. There could be at some point a passage that goes down, like you pull up a stone and you can drop your ingredients in. We don't know, right? All of that is speculative. None of it has any validity. We assume that there would have been a capstone because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to build it without one, but we do not have a capstone nor evidence that one was ever in place. As far as I am aware, again, I am not a pyramid expert. I just try to use logic in these situations. Geometrically, the 5 terminations of the pyramid form, when they depicted one-dimensionally, exhibit a perfect pentagram, and the pentagram is composed of 10 108-degree angles. Thus, the 5-pointed pentagram is the geometrical sum of the number 1080. The year 1080 of the pre-flood calendar was 2815 BC. A close approximate for this year was made in 1954 AD, when George G.M. James wrote that the Great Pyramid and Giza complex was constructed about 2800 BC. A scientific bullseye proved that. He couldn't prove it. How you gonna prove it? The Great Pyramid's dimensions record many astronomical knowledges. One of these is found in that the combined diameters of the Earth and Moon, being 7,920 and 2,160 miles, is 10,080 miles. Bonnie Gaunt notes in her fascinating research that the precise geometrical proportions of the Great Pyramid can be constructed on the diameters of the Earth and Moon. Math will math. Also, because of the Earth Moon relations, such as distance and velocity around the Sun and the Moon's movement around Earth, the lunar umbra, the Moon's shadow, the total darkness during an eclipse travels across the face of the Earth at a mean average of 1,080 miles per hour. The 1080 pentagram geometry of the Great Pyramid has a mysterious link to the Sumerian symbol for something that falls out of the sky to break up the earth, called the plow sign, referred to in Sumerian as the Arub. The pentagram symbol identifies a celestial body that drops from the sky to destroy the earth because God's harvest, humanity, has ceased bearing fruit. It must be recalled here that in 1924 AD, Davidson published his research on the geometrical distribution of the Great Pyramid's four cornerstones that unveiled a precise astronomical knowledge of a global timeline. The orbital chronology from 4039 BC to 2046 BC AD, when the Earth will be pushed off of its orbital belt by a large celestial body. Further, as will be seen in 2046 AD, a large object from space will slam into North America. All right, so let's talk about that. If this is true, this what is being stated right here, this is again a direct contradiction to the things that have already been stated in this particular study. And if there is indeed a celestial body that will push the Earth or off of its orbital belt, then that is the destruction of the world, right? That is the end of life and humanity on the planet. Period. The end. That date, the date when we begin to move out, begins the countdown, and the countdown is probably less than 100 days. Being disrupted from our orbit in that particular manner will destroy life upon Earth, unequivocally. There will no longer be the same rotation that we have. We will no longer receive the same distribution of sunlight, heat. All of the things will go away. We will be in extreme disruption. That will be the end of humanity. There will be no survivors from that particular thing. It is not a possibility. In addition to that, if this is a simulation, how does that even happen? But this is directly contradictory to the other date that is given, right? Now, I don't remember the precise date, but it's like 2106 or something like that, 2126 or something along those lines, where the final date for humanity, as opposed to the 2046 date, which is just kind of a calamity, right? This would absolutely be a calamity. Don't get that mistaken. But if we lost the capture of the moon, by itself would eradicate most of the life on Earth with very few exceptions, right? The tidal patterns of the Earth play an important part to the entirety of the biosphere. Any singular disruption of the tidal patterns in that particular way for an extended amount of time will cease biology, right? All of the microbiology in the oceans will cease to flourish. That is a guarantee. If we are no longer surrounding the sun in the way that we are now, our gravity is going to be affected differently. Everything about us is going to be different. This might be true. It is entirely speculative, but it might be true. If it is true, that is the date of the end of the earth. There is no date beyond that where we will be here to witness anything. And I know that is a big step for flat earthers, right? But so is that being thrown out of its orbit. Right? And I'm not calling Jason a flat earther. That's not what I'm doing. There are arguments made by flat earthers for these type of things. I mean, there is no way that we can survive losing our orbit. If we are disrupted from our orbit and we move out to Venus, that is going to kill us. There is no way we survive that. It's not going to happen. Every single thing about our existence would change. The atmosphere would be different. right? We would no longer be in the same pressure center in the universe. Everything would change. Everything. And so, if that is true, in 2046, the Earth is pushed off of its orbital belt by a celestial body, count that as the end of days. Right there begins the end. It will not be another 60 years. I can guarantee that. And I don't guarantee a whole lot of anything. The Psalm 1080 is the grammatical value of the Hebrew statement in Isaiah 66:1. Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Also, 1080 is the value of the Lord in his holy temple. Let all of the earth keep silence before him. Well, that's a lot of words to go into 1080. It's a good thing you can do anything with Gematria that you want to. We also read in Isaiah, God himself that formed the earth and made it. This equals 1080. I will point out that I give absolutely zero credence to anything Gematrica. Nothing, as far as I am aware, has proven to be accurate from the practice of that at all, in any way. In the Greek Gematria, the term Holy Spirit has the value of 1080. So let's just change the entire framework. If the total circumference of the circle was 1080, then its diameter would be 344. Bonigon notes that 344 is the geometrical value for great wonder in Greek, as well as the light of the world, as found in Matthew 5:14. The four cornerstones of the monument were highly polished white limestone megaliths, numbered among the 144,000 casing blocks of the monument. That is patently untrue. Want to know why? You cannot have a casing stone as a cornerstone. That does not work. Cornerstones are the beginning foundation for construction. That is a very specific, precise term. The casing stones are attached to the cornerstone. They are not the cornerstone themselves. That is an absolute misapplication of the term. These blocks were 100 inches thick and with a tolerance so smooth that modern architecture is not replicated. It is also important to note that there were 3 different colors of casing stones on the Giza Plateau. White was one, black was one, and red was one. We're only dealing with one particular color. I wonder why that is. For a long time, scholars debated on the existence of these perfect blocks until in 1837 AD, some of these surviving blocks buried at the base of the Great Pyramid were discovered by Colonel Weiss's expedition. The blocks along the lower courses originally had widened writings on them, still easily seen and translated in the days of Abraham. And still noticeable in the days of the Greek historian Herodotus in 450 BC. Now, this one I will lend a little bit of credence to. We do have writings of Herodotus that are contemporaneous with Herodotus in 450 BC that do describe these things. We do not have any writings of Abraham that do, right? I'm not done with Jasher yet, but I'm going to let you in on a secret. Abraham was not involved in the creation of Jasher. And so that is not a testimony from Abraham at all. It is an apologetic. It is not even historically accurate or viable in a multitude of ways, which we have already discovered, and we're only like 4 or 5 videos in. And so we can give a little bit of credence to Herodotus in 450 BC. I give 0 credence to Abraham, right? What is your source for that? It can be that there is a source outside of Abraham that is contemporaneous to 1837 to 1825 BC, which is only 12 years, right? And so Abraham was more than 12 years, right? He was older than 12 years when he ran off with his sister. What is this date? Back to the text. These blocks cover the interior limestone blocks that make up the Great Pyramid that we see today. The monument is exactly 203 levels of blocks, 203 being the geometrical value for he created. But 203 was not the intended height. With the placement of the chief cornerstone, the monument will be finished at 204 levels. The chief cornerstone represents the divine being that will sit atop the monument of man. The stone of the builders, the Anunnaki rejected. Right? I told you that we don't have any evidence about the capstone, right? But it does not make any sense whatsoever to believe that it was not completed at some point in time. Right? If you went through the effort to build this monument, to encase it after it is built in limestone with perfection and polished sides, which does appear to be the case, right? Then why would you not complete it? There is no reason to believe that it would not have been created or completed. There is reason to believe that the capstone was destroyed, stolen, right? If it was gold, which I believe is the legend, then it makes sense that that would have been taken for damn sure. We have many efforts over the years to try and break into the pyramids, right? And so the capstone being gone at some point does make sense, but it doesn't make sense that they would have completed this monument and two more monuments of the close to the same immensity on the same location, and they wouldn't have completed it. Maybe it's possible. Maybe there was a destruction that stopped him, but that's a really convenient destruction to stop them from putting the capstone on, and we don't have it at least in the area, right? What is the odds that they went through all of the effort to build this and the capstone's not there? Back to the text. Oh, but this, like, before we get back to the text, this right here is just a way to try to fit in Bible chronology, right? Well, we believe that at the end of the days, then Jesus is going to come back and he's going to lead us all. And so we have to reference that in every type of way that we possibly can. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. Jesus is not coming back. That is not a thing. And again, if that is confusing, check out either the book or the playlist. They are both available for free. The priest prophet Ezra wrote that the knowledges of God were preserved in the 204 books, which is an analogy of the 204 courses of the Great Pyramid once the chief cornerstone is placed atop it. That is an assumption that is being made with no real reason to believe so. It is entirely possible that he was actually talking about books. I get a little thrown off on chronology, right? It's not my forte, but I'm pretty sure that as was around the time of the Babylonian exile, there were definitely books around that could have been discovered in that particular point in time. The Phoenix chronology from man, banished in 3895 BC, counts 14 cursed earth periods of 414 years each. 5,796 years to 1902 AD, when planet Phoenix passed through the inner system, depositing millions of tons of cosmic dust and mud on Earth. I do not entirely discount this, right? I have said before, and I will say again, that mud floods are possible. How exactly it plays out could be a variety of reasons, but I am of full belief that at some point in time, the Earth was farther out, right? That we were around where the asteroid belt is, and that there was something that happened that caused a disruption that pushed us farther in to the orbit, right? That's a lot different than taking you out of the orbit. But even that resulted in life changes on an extraordinary level from Tiamat to Earth. That is legendary. It is entirely possible that all of these old life, this old chronology, these extended years, was due to that. It is possible that the vapor canopy was at that point in time. All of that is speculative. The moon does consist of the almost exact same elements in proportion to the area around the Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of America. It's no longer the Gulf of Mexico, but the Gulf of America. And it is entirely possible that that was dislodged and became the moon from there. That is all speculative. Take it with a grain of salt. But we do pass through space. I believe that. And space is not empty. There's all kinds of stuff out there. And some of the things that are out there is dust. Absolutely. We just passed through a gaseous cloud. It took us a couple of 100 years to pass through. We went from bright to dim. Now we're at bright again, right? The sun in my lifetime has gone from yellow to white. It was white at a different point in time in history. We went into the gas cloud, it became yellow. We got life, and now we're coming out of it. Things are changing. The sun is different. All of that is possible, right? We passed through a gas cloud. That is why the sun was yellow and not white. It is possible that there was something that brought this in, depositing this cosmic dust, or it is possible that us passing through the cosmos entered a region where there was already cosmic dust. Neither one of those is disqualifying for this, right? Both of those are equal possibilities. It could come in from an object, or it could already be existent in space. If you don't understand that, right? If that seems a little bit like, what? I want you to go look at the Eagle Nebula, right? The twin pillars of creation. Any of the gaseous formations in deep space, which we have observed, right? Independently collaborated, corroborated, however you want to look at it. Independent research has shown that there is gas clouds in space. It is not improbable that the Earth would pass through them. It is entirely likely that we may pass through one that will eradicate life on Earth entirely. What would happen if we pass through a cloud of hydrogen sulfide? Acid rain and death immediately, right? What if it was ammonium nitrate? Well, it would cause death immediately, right? Those things are out there. We can't even see them. And so it is entirely possible that we did pass through tons of cosmic dust. I've also stated that if the Tiamat thing happened, the asteroid belts are out there, and it is possible that some of them are not in an elliptical orbit, stable and contained. And so there could be a great chunk of gravel and clay just floating around out there. And as it comes in, it starts disintegrating, but it doesn't burn up completely because there's very little resistance in lignite. But the lignite would absorb any moisture in the air and become mud instantly. And you could have rain. That is mud. You could have an entire mud flood just from passing through space. It doesn't have to have a planet. It can, but doesn't need it. Doesn't have to have an asteroid or a meteorite, right? Any of those things. All of that is entirely possible just due to chemistry. And so I don't discount the mud flood ideas, right? I do discount Tartaria, right? The way that Tartaria is shown is completely dismissible in the same way that Jasher is completely dismissible. Back to the text. I'm assuming that this is 1902 because we have a 1902 right here. 1902 AD is the last pass of Phoenix before it returns in 2040 AD and results with a pole shift, meteoric fallout, global flooding and earthquakes, and the death of 25% of humanity, known as the revelation at the sixth seal. That is completely different than what was just being said for 2040, right? A pole shift is not moving us out of orbit. Meteoric fallout is not that either. Neither is global flooding or earthquakes. All of those are possible, right? And this is much more likely to be what is actually going to happen around this date. There are many indicators that this date could be very important. But this is not you're being knocked out of orbit. That is not what this is saying, as opposed to what was just said a little bit a while ago. Also, 1902 is the year that my grandmother was born, and we had a lot of conversations, right? A lot of very esoteric conversations, although she didn't like magic at all, right? She wasn't very happy with that. She was looking forward to the end days. Right? She was very much in that zone. But we talked about a lot of things. And one of the things that would have come up, right, if this Phoenix thing was a thing in reality, my grandmother would have told me. I can promise you that. Yes, that was the year that she was born. It would have been well known in rural Tennessee, where she was from, right? McNairy County, Shelby County. There's not a whole lot of entertainment back in 1902. And one of the things that they did was look at the stars. They paid attention to the sky. And The phoenix phenomenon, that would have been visible in the daytime. That is one of the defining characteristics of it, correct? And if it was visible in the daytime for an extended period of time, it would have been known. There would have been some kind of significance attached to it. And again, it was the exact year my grandmother was born, so she didn't visually witness it herself, but she would have heard about it. We would have talked about it at some point. This would have been like this one right here is one of the ones that you're going to have to show me news reports from 1902 about this thing in the sky. You're going to have to show me contemporaneous reports from various locations that, hey, what is this thing? Why are we seeing this? And it's possible that it's there, and I do not have it. It might be in the footnotes. It is not marked. It may be in some of these that we're going to go through. We will deal with that when we get there. But again, it's not evident from the text. Yeah. The actual levels of blocks of the structures form a chronometrical countdown that begins in the last days, starting in 1902 AD. Does it have something that tells you to start at 1902 AD? Is there some inscription that says, hey, on this date with this particular configuration of the stars, because they didn't have the AD date, I get that, right? But where are you pulling this reference date from? Because you want it to play out that way? That's what it seems like. I mean, it forms a chronometrical countdown that begins in the last days, starting at 1902 AD. Well, that is directly contradictory to the accounts in the Bible, because the accounts in the Bible are one, nobody knows the day and the hour, right? And the other one is, this generation shall not pass before these things come to be. And they did. That is all done. There is no last days. It is not happening. That's all related to Nero. A date also figuring prominently in the internal chronometry of the Great Pyramid as found in the extensive charts of chronotecture. We may wind up having to do that one. Thus, 1902 AD begins at a 204-year countdown to the return of the chief cornerstone in the year 2106 AD. The same year that we have already seen is the 6,000th year of mankind's banishment from Eden at 3895 BC. The length of 240 years is 2,448 months. The Egyptian number designating cataclysm. It was 2448 Annus Mundi, 1447 BC. Like, if this is the number that designates the Egyptian cataclysm, and I cannot argue that it is not, I do not have that knowledge, then why is it not in years? Why is it in months? That does not make any sense, right? Why does it? Just because the math has to work. That is why. It was in 2448 Annus Mundi, 1447 BC, that the Israelites escaped after Egypt after the country was plagued with terrible disasters. There is zero record of that happening outside of the Bible. Right? The Egyptians do not record these disasters. They don't record any of the plagues. None of them. There is flooding in Egypt every single year. There are problems with the Nile, not a lot. There are frogs and flies and all of those things, but none of those things are recorded as calamities of the significance that they are given from Exodus at all. There is zero archaeological corroboration of any of those disasters. There is only one account of Israelites, the Hebrew people, not even Israelites, recorded as the annals, right? And that was that they were trying to invade and they were turned back at Gishon, right? Apologists take that account and say this was when the Israelites left, when the Exodus happened, and that is patently untrue. It was a repulsion of an invasion, and that is clearly recorded in the chronology. There were, however, Midianite raids into the desert. That is probably where the legend that became Moses came from. One thing I want you to pay attention to when you are reading through Exodus, and there are a lot of problems in Exodus, but this one should help you, right? How were the Israelites guided out of Egypt? An angel of God, with the full knowledge of all of the things that God wanted him to have, led them through the desert as a pillar of fire and smoke, right? That is the story. That is what is accounted. How did he get lost? How did the angel get lost? What do you mean, Pitt? Well, have you read through Exodus? It tells you quite explicitly in the story of the Exodus before the Red Sea that they had to turn around in Ethiopia. Why did they have to do that? Because the angel missed the pass, or they were on a raid and they were about to get hammered by an army that was coming to meet them. That's possible. That's entirely likely. If they were a raiding party and they were being met by Pharaoh, that would explain a lot of things, right? Because first off, you have all of the destructions in Egypt, right? And Pharaoh just discounts them. And then you have the death of the firstborn son, and he's like, fine, leave. And then he chases them after their God killed all of the firstborn children. Really? That's who you're going to chase through the desert? No, you're going to be like, go, leave. But if there is a bunch of raids going on for your people, and you just happen to come upon them because they had to turn around after they got repelled from Ethiopia, well, that makes a lot more sense. There are passes through the Red Sea today that if the wind and the tides are right, you can walk right across. It's a thing. It is real. It is still existent. They still use it today. And it was known in the times of Midian. It's recorded. And it is entirely likely that Moses was a Midianite with raiding on his mind, and they went and plundered in Egypt. That is the more likely understanding. And that has bearing in the chronological evidence. In archaeology, we can find records of that happening, right? Not the Pharaoh got drowned part of it. That's an extrapolation. But the raids, absolutely. The passes through the Red Sea, yeah. Even the point that it is in front of the mountain of Baal where they had to stop, which, by the way, is a whole nother problem, right? Why could God only open the passageway through the Red Sea in front of the mountain of Baal, the god of the wind and thunder? I wonder what could possibly be going on there. I wonder. This was the Exodus, revealing that the 2448th month after 1902 AD that will occur in 2106 AD signified a planetary exodus. That is a massive, massive jump. I have no problem with speculation. This is a massive point of speculation. And the chief cornerstone will sit upon the flat area atop the monument that measures 48 feet wide and 30 feet high. When capped with a cornerstone, the structure will measure 485 feet high. Bonigon notes that the grammatical value for this statement, there is no rock like our God, found in 2 Samuel 2:2, is 485. Also in Psalm 73:17, the words, the sanctuary of God is 485, as well as the prophecy in Isaiah 60:19, the Lord shall be unto you an everlasting light. None of that is relevant, right? I mean, it might be. It's a possibility, but not really, because at this point in time, Samuel doesn't exist. At this point in time, none of the Psalms are recorded. At this point in time, Isaiah is not even existent. So how? How is this relevant to the construction of the pyramid? It's not. The problem with gematria is you can find correlations for absolutely anything that you want to. And this is even an example, right, of changing the measurement so that it fits. The total geometrical height of the Great Pyramid, if the capstone is in place, is exactly 5,814 pyramid inches, which is paralleled by an unusual astronomical fact. The peculiar shaft up and out of the structure has long been known to point at the Orion constellation. Long been known to point is Orion being an ancient Masonic symbol, messianic symbol. All right, a lot of problems, but uh, For the first point, right, the shaft has not been known about for a long period of time. It was discovered in the 1920s. Discovered is a big word, but and it is possible that it was indeed oriented to be aligned with Orion, but that is not in the current stars, right? The progression of the equinox, which is a thing, has led to it not being a direct correlation anymore. Now you have to extrapolate back in time, and there's definitely some date issues, right? It doesn't comport with 6,000 years at all. That's not when Orion would have been there. This is actually a proof against the assertions being given in this document. John Gordon, in Egypt, child of Atlantis, wrote, "The maximum altitude above the horizon during the cycle of precession of the constellation Orion is 58 degrees 14 minutes when it rises almost due east at azimuth 91 degrees. Another coincidence is found in the research of Graham Hancock. In antiquity, the Great Pyramid was the symbol in Egypt for the Gate of Rustu, a spiritual realm of the dead. The Egyptian epoch for when the spirits ruled long ago was 5813 years, according to Manetho of Alexandria. Because the monument was never finished, the cornerstone was rejected. It presently stands at 5,448 inches, pyramid inches, which amazingly identifies a particular passage in the Bible that researchers have long suspected refers to the Great Pyramid for other reasons. The following passage in the prophetic book of Isaiah has the grammatical value of 5448. In that day shall there be an altar of the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, and it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto the Lord and host of the land of Egypt." Well, context is important. And in the days of Isaiah, there was already a pyramid in Egypt. And so in that day, there is already, right? There shall there be means that it will be made. That is what the phraseology of that is. It will be placed, it will be sent, it will be set. That is the phraseology. Not that it is already existent, right? And a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. Well, it's not at the border. It is well inside of Egypt, right? It is not in any part, even a little bit of any part that was promised to the land of Israel at all. It is not on the border, which is clearly defined in the Bible. And so that has zero bearing. It is not a pillar at the border thereof with the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and a witness means that you have to know the significance of it, right? If there is a sign to be given, that means that it will be known, right? It won't be speculative. It will be known. When you see the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, it will be an abomination that causeth desolation, which means that it is something that should not be where it is. That's abomination. And causeth desolation means that every single person on the entirety of the planet will witness it and be like, oh, fuck. And that's what that means. That's how that phraseology plays out. That would be a sign from the Lord. A sign from the Lord is not going to be something that can be interpreted in a multitude of ways. It is going to be something that is very definitive in what it stands for. A witness unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt. This refers to the altar of Adam, placed at the center of the earth, but Adam didn't create the altar. The 0-degree longitude and latitude, the prime meridian of the pre-flood civilization known as the Pillar of Heaven, the central axis. Prior to Mohammedan times in Arabia, the pyramids were called pillars. Well, there is a significant difference between a pillar and a pyramid. Definitions. In Lost Scriptures of Giza are chapters full of historical and archaeological evidences and proofs that this passage refers to the Great Pyramid. We may have to read the Lost Scriptures of Giza. Y'all remind me. Giza means border, and pyramids were signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, according to Jeremiah the prophet. The Book of Enoch records that the chronologist prophet wrote 366 books. These books being no different than the books of the 204 books of the prophet priest Ezra. Really? No difference between 204 and 366. There is no difference there. Right? That's not even saying, oh, well, there's one more level to be completed. That is saying what? Right? 162? You're going to add 162 to it? They are symbols of the pyramid architectural dimensions. The pyramid's present height at 5,448 pyramid inches is exactly 366 inches under its intended height at 5,814 pyramid inches when the chief cornerstone is placed. The pyramid, as the central axis of the world, at the middle of the earth, identifies it with Mount Meru in Eastern traditions, Mount Masu of Sumer, the tree of knowledge, the tree Yggdrasil of the Scandinavians, Irminsul of the ancient Germans, etc. That is going to be an impossible sell for me. You will not convince me that the tree of life, right, the tree of life, which is Yggdrasil and Irminsul, right, is the pyramids in Egypt. You will not convince me of that. The present 5,448 height as a calendrical code identifies the year 5,448 Annus Mundi, or 1554 AD, the exact year that the prophecies of Nostradamus had Europe on fire with its startling and dire predictions. I am unaware of Nostradamus being directly correct in anything. And you can, again, just like Gematria, you can take the quatrains to mean anything. I have not seen any evidence that they actually mean anything. In Nostradamus and the Planets of the Apocalypse, we find that the French prophet of Jewish ancestry was knowledgeable of Planet Phoenix and its appearance in 1902 and its return for cataclysms in 2040, as well as the second global disaster that will occur in 2046 AD. Second, you say, both dates encoded with the chronometry of the Great Pyramid. As the altar of man, Adam, at the center of the earth, the Great Pyramid is referred in the Vedic writings of ancient India as the altar of Agni. You assume, like the Great Pyramid, it was covered with Vedic scriptures. That would be different, right? The Great Pyramid was covered with Egyptian, not Vedic, with knowledges of its stones, and these stones numbered specifically 10,800 bricks. This aligns with the Arabic traditions, where we find that there is a preserved tablet from of old, a stone writing dating back to the beginning of time, that contains all of the prophecies and writings and knowledges. If there was indeed a preserved tablet that had all the prophecies and writings, then we would have it, because there is no point of having a prophecy that no one knows about. Right? If the divine is going to record all of these prophecies onto a single stone, why take it from us? Why even write it down? The angel of death, with 1,080 eyes, 360 eyes within 3 large eyes, searches continually through the records, making sure no one dies before their time. Sometime in Enoch's prophetic career, he had a vision of the Great Pyramid and its relation to the Tree of Life. He called it a mountain of fire at the middle of the earth. Pyramid means fire in the middle. He describes its stones as brilliant and beautiful, splendid to behold. And beautiful was its surface, which we know describes the original white polished casing blocks of the monument. An angel tells Enoch, that mountain thou beholdest, the extent of whose head resembled the seat of the Lord throne, will be the seat on which will sit the holy and great Lord of glory, the chief cornerstone, the everlasting King, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. That is not a thing. That Enoch fully understood the mystery of the Son of Man, the Christ, is clearly seen in Enoch 46, 1-3, where we find him at the court of heaven beholding the Ancient of Days, the Creator, and another figure named the Son of Man, who would come to earth and break the power of the mighty and lay low the kings of the earth. That didn't happen. It was revealed to Enoch that the Son of Man was ancient. his name invoked in heaven before the sun and stars were created. He, Christ, would be a support pillar for the righteous and shall be the light of nations. The title for the Creator as Ancient of Days further supports fact that the antediluvian civilization reckoned time by the passing of days, as most important than moons, months, and years. I don't have an argument, right? It is possible that Enoch wrote that the Savior would be the light of nations, links the pyramid with the Egyptian name for the monument. The Great Pyramid was called Harkuti, or Lord of Lights, or Lord of the Glorified Elect. The sign for Harkuti was the heptagram, the seven-pointed star. Intriguingly, the seven-pointed geometry is the only way to obtain the elusive 52-degree angle. Or you could just draw it. And the structure, like, that's not the only way. You can obviously get it from a pyramid. And the structure at Giza was slanted at precisely 51 degrees, 51 to 52, or 52 degrees. Even the interior passage angles inside the structures are sloped at 52 degrees. The heptagram is mysterious because unlike other geometrical forms, like the squares and triangles, no two geometrical forms can combine to make it. Further, Harkuti was related to the Egyptian cornerstone of eternal word. Of course, this is another connection to the chief cornerstone, the Word made flesh. The Word was never flesh. The calendrics for this year of 2815 BC, 1080 already examined, demonstrates further unique characteristics for this time. The Great Pyramid was finished 576 years before the deluge, or 144 times 4, the sum of 144 being a golden proportion number. This year was also 288 of Vedic chronology, being 144 plus 144 from 3103 BC, which marked the start of the Black Age with emergence of an Anunnaki matriarch's role. This corresponds calendrically with the fact that 2815 BC was the 24th year of the Anunnaki dynasty over the Sethites, called the Oppression. This 24 years was 288 months, paralleling the 288 years since 3103 BC. Footnotes: 1. Fingerprints of the Gods, 192. 2. Stolen Legacy, 51. 3. Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid, 81. 4. Isaiah, 45:18. 5. Today, Tomorrow, and the Great Beyond, 456, 457. 6. Egypt, Child of Atlantis, 193. 7. Fingerprints of the Gods, 405. 8. Isaiah, 19, 19 and 20. 9. The Book of Adam and Eve, 2. 3. 23, 3. 10. Tales of the Prophets, 14, 15. 11. Enoch, 24, 1 and 2. 8. 25, 1. 12. Enoch, 48, 2 and 3. 13. Gerald Massey Lectures, 235. And that is going to bring us to the end of today's exploration of the Archaix Chronicon. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I do have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. I don't have a whole lot to add, right? It is interesting to note that there were 2 references to Graham Hancock, and I guarantee that wouldn't happen today. Probably because there was no response. But there is some things in here that could be true. Most of this is probably not, right? There is no way to create the pyramid in the manner that it was created without geometry playing a part. Sacred geometry is a thing, has been a thing for a very long time, but we don't know when it started. We make assumptions, we have guesses, we don't know. We do know that Pythagoras at least was doing it. We do know that it was significant to other peoples as well. So when it began, who knows, right? It is entirely possible, probable even, that sacred geometry was intricately linked to creating the pyramid. But we do not know who it was. It was almost certainly not Enoch or any of the biblical people. There is no reason to believe that that was a thing that happened at any point. Why would they even build it there? That is not the promised land, right? That is a major contention. If you are going to build the altar of God, why is it not in the land of God? Probably for the exact same reason that none of the churches of Revelation are actually in the land of God either, right? They're all in the land of Gog, not God. They all exist in the land of Gog and Magog. All the churches of Revelation, none of them are in Israel. None of them are in Egypt. None of them are in Cappadocia. They're all in Turkey. I wonder why. I wonder what the significance is. I've explained that actually. And so that's where I want to wrap it up. I've explained what I needed to fairly well, I feel. And if I'm wrong, then I am willing to be corrected. Drop it in the box. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment, whether you agree or disagree. Put it in the box, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with those super things. Consider joining for a membership, picking up a copy of any of my books, or reaching out to me through the links provided down below. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pittstake. Peace.